Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be happy to take your extra 13 seconds, but I want to go back to what I addressed at the outset. I mean, this was not only sloppy, it not only violated all procedures, but if this information had gotten out, American lives could have been lost. The Houthis had this information, could reposition their defensive systems. So I want to get a little more information about this. Director Gabbard, did you participate in the group chat with Secretary of Defense and other Trump senior officials discussing the Yemen war plans?
Senator, I don't want to get into the specifics.
Ma'am, were you on? You're not going to be willing to address. So you're not, are you denying, will you answer my question, ma'am? You were not TG on this group chat?
I'm not going to get into the specifics.
So you refuse to acknowledge whether you were on this group chat?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Why are you going to get into the specifics? Is it because it's all classified?
Because this is currently under review by the National Security Council.
Because it's all classified? If it's not classified, share the text now.
As the White House previously
stated, is it classified or non-classified information on this text? Director Gabbard, you are the security executive and set access guidelines for classified information. Did you contact the Defense Secretary or others after this specific military planning was put out and say, hey, we should be doing this in a SCIF?
There was no classified material that was shared in that
So then if there was no classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the question. If this was Director Gabbard, if this was a rank and file intelligence officer who did this kind of careless behavior, what would you do with them?
Senator, I'll reiterate that there was no classified material that was shared in that
Ma'am, if there's no classified materials, share. And then if there's no classified materials, then you can't even answer the question whether you're on the chat. This is strangely familiar, and I think my colleagues will remember, when you couldn't answer the question, is Edward Snowden a traitor? Ma'am, I have serious doubts about anyway. Director Gabbard, I'm going to give you this. Tweeted just 11 days ago, and I'm quoting you, any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. So if this information is classified, what are you going to do?
Senator, 2 points here. First of all, there's a difference between inadvertent release versus
careless and sloppy,
malicious leaks of classified information. The second point is there was no classified information that was on
this committee should get that information.
The question I have for you, Director Gabbard, involves this question of Elon Musk wasn't going to see the military's China war plans because he said he, quote, has business in China and he would be susceptible perhaps to that. That was his comment. So as DNI, you're responsible for security clearance policies across the government. Under your watch, how are you going to go about carrying out this obligation? Because I think it obviously is a very significant one in terms of American national security.
Thank you, Senator. As you know, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence provides oversight over these different 18 intelligence elements. Leaders within those elements are empowered with that responsibility to uphold the trust that the American people have placed in them. In this example that you've cited, both Secretary Hegseth as well as President Trump completely denied the assertion that Elon Musk was going to receive any kind of classified war plan brief pertaining to China or any other country.
So on the question of whether the president has the prerogative to get clearances is really the area that I want to touch on, because you're formally responsible for security clearance policies, and that's why I'm asking about it. So can a president decide who gets the clearance?
Yes.
So what about your role? You're formally responsible for security clearance policies.
That is also true.
So how do we resolve it? The president just gets his way.
The elected president and commander-in-chief has the authority to provide a security clearance to those who he deems necessary.
Let me ask a couple of questions on this. Director Gabbard, let me start with you on this. Iran has been listed as one of the top sponsors of terrorism for a very long time. They are the primary armors of Hezbollah, of Hamas, of the Houthis. They're arming the Russians to be able to kill Ukrainians. They continue to be able to destabilize the region. And just in the recent days, when many nations in the Gulf region have talked about how to provide greater stability, Iranian leadership stepped out and made very clear statements. They want a one-state solution for Israel, and it's to drive out all Jews. So this continues to be an issue not just for the region, but for Americans in particular. So my question is on this is the sanctions and the effect of sanctions, what we know about the Iranian response. Under the Biden administration, those sanctions will turn down, where, quite frankly, Iran has been able to sell $90 billion in oil on the global market to be able to rearm itself and all the others around the region. Now sanctions are now going back onto Iran again. What do we know about the effect of those sanctions?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. These sanctions have just begun to be reinstated, so the full effects have not yet borne fruit. But the message that the president has sent with his maximum pressure campaign is certainly heard. As the chairman mentioned in his opening remarks, President Trump recently sent a letter to the leader of Iran expressing his interest in direct talks in order to try to de-escalate and to prevent war, prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon, but also stated that there would be military consequences if there was no direct negotiations. So President Trump is continuing to carry out his vision and mission of peace through strength, acting in the best interests of the American people. We will see what choices are made from here.
Something on a very different track here, which is I very much agree with the conclusion of the ATA that foreign illicit drug actors are a major threat in the United States, and many of you have spoken to this today. Is the IC wrong in its omission of Canada as a source of illicit fentanyl in the ATA? I was surprised, given some of the rhetoric, that there is no mention of Canada in the ATA.
Senator, the focus in my opening and the ATA was really to focus on the most extreme threats in that area. And our assessment is that the most extreme threat related to fentanyl continues to come from and through Mexico.
Directors Gabbard and Ratcliffe and Patel, thank you all again for being here. So as you're all keenly aware, Section 702 of FISA is an extremely useful authority to help keep our nation safe. I also know that we need to rebuild American people's trust and confidence that such authorities are not being misused by the intelligence community to unlawfully target Americans. So since taking over your respective agencies, can you tell me and tell the American people how effective the recent changes have been in protecting privacy and civil liberties of each and every Americans? And then, if you will, comment on how useful the authority is in generating intelligence that actually protects the homeland. We'll start with you, Director Gabbard.
Senator, Section 702, which authorizes the foreign collection of non-U.S. persons outside of the United States, continues to be one of our most effective collection tools to ensure our national security. There are a number of reforms that the Senate passed, that Congress passed last year, that have proven to strengthen the protections of Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. In the short time that I've been in the seat, I've seen a few examples of that directly, most recently through the FISA court, calling in an amici to come in and weigh in on a dispute regarding provisions that would further protect Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. I'll be visiting our friends at the NSA next week and doing a quote-unquote ride-along to observe directly how those reforms that Congress passed are being implemented to protect Americans' civil liberties, and look forward to reporting back after I've had that opportunity.
Director Gabbard, I didn't intend to get into the Jeffrey Goldberg story, but something you said has sort of puzzled me. According to open source reporting at 11:44 on the morning of March 15th, Secretary Hegseth put into this group text a detailed operation plan, including targets, the weapons we were going to be using, attack sequences, and timing. And yet you've testified that nothing in that chain was classified. Wouldn't that be classified? What if that had been made public that morning before the attack took place?
Senator, I can attest to the fact that there were no classified or intelligence equities that were included in that chat group at any time. And I
So the
defer,
attack sequencing and timing and weapons and targets, you don't consider should have been classified
I
or
defer
were
to the
classified?
Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council on that question.
Well, you're the head of you're the head of the intelligence community, and you're supposed to know about classifications. So your testimony very clearly today is that nothing was in that set of texts that were classified. I'll follow up on Senator Wyden's question. If that's the case, please release that whole text stream so that the public can have a view of what actually transpired on this discussion. It's hard for me to believe that targets and timing and weapons would not have been classified. Well, let me move on. You approved this report, this annual report, prepared by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Is this submitted to the White House routinely in anticipation of its public release?
I don't know what you mean by submitted routinely.
Was this report submitted to the White House before its release today?
It was submitted to them once it was completed. I think probably around the same time it was sent to all of you.
I want to move on. One note that surprised me, I've been on this committee now this is my 13th year. Every single one of these reports that we have had has mentioned global climate change as a significant national security threat, except this one. Has something happened? Has global climate change been solved? Why is that not in this report? And who made the decision that it should not be in the report when it's been in every one of the 11 prior reports?
I can't speak to the decisions made previously, but this annual threat assessment has been focused very directly on the threats that we deem most critical to the United States and our national security. Obviously, we're aware of occurrences within the environment and how they may impact operations, but we're focused on the direct threats to Americans' safety, well-being, and security.
How about how they will impact mass migration, famine, dislocation, political violence, which is the finding, by the way, of the 2019 annual threat assessment under the first Trump administration? You don't consider that a significant national security threat?
For the intelligence community, being aware of the environment that we're operating in is a given. What I focused this annual threat assessment on, and the IC focused this threat assessment on, are the most extreme and critical direct threats to our national security.
Let me ask a direct question. Who decided climate change should be left out of this report after it's been in the prior 11? Where was that decision
I
made?
gave direction to our team at ODNI to focus on the most extreme and critical national security threats that we
Your
face.
direction include no comments on climate change?
Senator, as I said, I focused on the most extreme and direct national
That's not a
security
response
threats
to my question.
that we face.
Did you instruct that there be no finding in terms of climate change in this report?
I don't recall giving that instruction.
Final questions in a few short seconds that I have left. You all concede, and it's in the report repeatedly, about the cyber danger from China, from Russia, from Iran. Why then is the administration deconstructing FISA? 130 people fired. The General Hawk talked about the importance of public-private cooperation. That section of FISA seems to have been disestablished. What possible policy reason is there for undermining CISA's relationship to the states with regard to elections and to the private sector with regard to cybersecurity when the cybersecurity threat is only growing? Anybody want to tackle that?
I won't speak for all of my colleagues here, but I don't believe any of us have any insight into those specific staffing decisions that have been made.
Well, let me ask you this question. You've all found, the report has found explicitly growing cyber threats, including to elections from Russia, China, Iran. do you believe that it's in the national interest to diminish our capacity to deal with those cyber issues? Yes or no?
President Trump is focused on effects and making sure that the people that we have and the resources that we have are focused on our national security. He and his team recognize that more people doesn't necessarily always mean better effects. Those are some of the things that are driving the changes that we're seeing across the administration, is getting all of our agencies back and focused on their core mission.